Mark is having some technical difficulties. He's going to come across the hall and use my computer.
Okay, well, we'll let you sort that out. We have quorum, so it's 1 o'clock. So I think we're, John Chambers, tell me otherwise, we're good to go.
We're live on YouTube now, so I think we're good to go, Andy.
Okay, thanks, Christy. I'll just ask for a motion. We got a few new people we'll introduce, but I'll get a motion for adoption of the agenda, please. Call the meeting to order. Adoption of the agenda. Moved by Ron Windover, second by Catherine Moore. All in favor?
Yes.
That's passed. Thank you. Actually, what I'll do is I'll ask if anyone's opposed. That usually works a little bit better. So to keep us moving forward, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda? Seeing and hearing none, can I get a motion for the approval of the minutes from the meeting of May 21st was our last, moved by Director Smith, second by Director Dunn. Anyone opposed to receiving and adopting the minutes? Okay, we'll consider that passed. There's no business arising from the minutes. We've got a couple of new faces we want to introduce. So I think Robert Rock has joined us from the Durham Region Township of Skugal. Welcome, Robert. Do you want to say hi and give us a quick,
everyone. Very excited.
Quick minute on who you are?
Hi, everyone. Excited to be part of the group. Looking forward to being a member. This is it's exciting. It's something I'm very interested in, and been working very diligently to read up on all of the past meetings to get myself up to speed. So yeah, I'm a new councillor from the township of Skugal for Ward 3, which is the Skugal Island ward. So the lake surrounds my ward, so it's also very important to myself as a resident and all of the rest of the residents within the ward. So absolutely looking forward to all of the great things that we'll be doing together.
Excellent. Look forward to working with you. Thanks, Robert. I also want to introduce Jeff Forbes is our First Nations representative. Jeff, yeah, there you are. If you want, I know when Jamie Coombs didn't get reelected, so Jeff's been appointed as the First Nations representative. So welcome, Jeff. We look forward to working with you as well. You want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Ani and everyone, Miigwech for allowing me to sit on the board here. I'm looking forward to learning, listening, and moving forward here with everything that's going on. So I'm a newly elected councillor here at the Skugal First Nation. I grew up in Port and lived on the First Nation lands here for quite some time. Flopping in between out west and here, I've been, very highly in the rivers and outdoors guiding for many, many years now until I came back home with my family. So, yeah, very avid hunter and fishing, and yeah, looking forward to meeting everybody in person eventually, away from these screens. So I just want to say Miigwech again, and thank you.
Awesome. Thanks both. Thank you both. We look forward to working with both of you, obviously. So great. And we all look forward to meeting face to face at some point. So item 6 is deputations. We have none. We're going to move right into presentations and a couple of action items. Our first presentation is regarding the audited financial statement from 2020. I'll turn it over to Wanda Stephen to introduce our presenters and where we're going with this one. So Wanda, it's all yours.
Mr. Chair, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Tyson Chenette. Oh, Mark's taller than me. So Tyson Chenette is the managing partner of the Fenelon Falls branch of Peter Chenette Professional Corporation. Tyson has been doing our audit for about 7 years now. And we're very grateful to him for his expertise and his knowledge, and most particularly this year, his patience with us. So we're also having Jonathan Lucas, who's our general accountant, and he is working closely with Tyson, and he's responsible for the financial statements that are being presented today. Thank you. Tyson?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Wanda. No, it has certainly been an interesting year, as no doubt everyone is aware. So my job as the auditor is basically to look at all the information, the financial information that's prepared by management, and we perform a variety of kind of tests and examinations on it to see if there's any errors and omissions. This year obviously was a bit different, where we did a bit less in-office testing than we have in prior years, as they moved to a more virtual record system. And we did a bit more online and kind of through the computers than we have in the past. And so there was some changes there, which I'm sure is common with every organization at this moment, essentially. So the first thing I will start with is our overall opinion. And our opinion on these financial statements is that they do fairly represent the financial position of the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority in all material aspects. And so that basically just means that we believe everything here is true and there is no issues or concerns. You will notice that the statements are marked draft, and that's because until the statements are taken responsibility by the board, they are still in draft form, and you later on today will get a chance to approve them after asking any questions or addressing any concerns that you have. Also, as it is every year, we are still waiting on the lawyer's letter that is received from the lawyer, basically outlining that there's no outstanding legal claims that we are unaware of. And normally it has never been an issue in the past, but we do always wait till that comes in to basically get everything finalized. So the first part of the statements we normally talk about is the statement of operations. And I will kind of go over the highlights of these different statements. I won't go too in depth on everything because I know you kind of have all your interim reports and that kind of keep you up to date on everything. And also these are obviously received a bit later than they normally are. These are your 2020 results. Normally we're a bit closer to the end of 2020. I know this year has been a bit later. And so these results are kind of more dated than they typically would be. I will pause after I finish going over each page, just to give you a chance then to ask any questions you have about that page before moving on to the next statement. So this is our statement of operations, and this basically is your income statement for those who are more accustomed to a for-profit business, and it shows all your revenue for the year and all your expenditures for the year. Of note, you will see that the income was down for the year. The main reductions were in special benefiting, grants and other, and special project management. This was directly because of COVID and basically a whole bunch of certain projects that were planned to be completed during the year and budgeted to be completed were put on hold or delayed as COVID was accommodated, essentially. As if you'll all remember, these are the 2020 statements. So it would have been around March, April, where everything kind of really started to happen COVID-wise, and that obviously put a delay on some of those projects. Most of them have been all approved by the different granting bodies to be delayed and pushed a year, and so it is anticipated many of them will still be completed, just on a slightly slower schedule than was anticipated. And if you'll notice, also down below in the expenses, those corresponding expenses for those special projects are also reduced significantly. And so kind of while the income was down for those projects, the expenses were also down for those projects. So it wasn't a huge actual effect on your net bottom line. It was more kind of some of the work that was planned to be done has just been delayed as it wasn't feasible to do at that time. If you do look down to the bottom though, you will note that there is a surplus of $222,768. This was more than budgeted, and it was mainly driven by integrated watershed management, planning and regulation, and the stewardship and conservation areas. In these areas particularly, Some of the revenue, well, it did decrease for them, particularly in planning and regulation in terms of just actual permitting fees that were applied for. They did some part of the operational levies is kind of allocated towards these areas. And so that kind of part tended to stay steady. But with everything kind of temporarily shut down for a moment there, labor costs, which are the primary driver of expenses in these areas, were drastically reduced, particularly for the period where people were laid off. And then were even kind of reduced a bit further by having some difficulty refilling positions for some people who didn't return. And so kind of those main areas are really where kind of that surplus was generated by, was basically reduced labor costs in those areas, while revenues didn't fall quite as much as anticipated in those areas. There was a couple kind of other little bits there that helped as well. There was a government grant for $25,000 that was obviously unanticipated due to COVID wage subsidies. And there was a couple other projects that they managed to pick up that also weren't anticipated that increased some of the funding in those areas a bit more than was expected when budgeting was done. Does anyone have any questions about the statement of operations?
I have a question.
Yeah, if you have questions, you'll just have to speak up because with the screen up, I can't see anybody. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Latham. Just one question in regards to the expenditures, and I don't know whether Wanda or somebody. The corporate services, our budget was X 747.3, and the actual was 779. Is there any reason why it's so much more than budgeted amount? Was there some unusual expenses that we're not sure of?
There is some expenses due to legal costs, and also the labor cost reductions weren't quite as much in corporate services as they were in other areas. I know there as well was kind of some different expenditures just to accommodate the COVID changes and kind of different procedures and things. But if it's more specific, Wanda or Jonathan may have to address that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Tyson is correct. So during the pandemic, the essential staff were primarily under the corporate services brand, and so our salaries didn't go down. We were also in the 2020 budget we were supposed to eliminate an FTE, and we didn't do that due to the necessity of the requirements of the pandemic, along with meeting all the deliverables, such as payroll, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shinet. Thank you, Wanda, for appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, just a quick question. The actual excess, do we have reserves we put them in, or do they just stay in general operating? Like sometimes your excess is related to just timing more than anything else, and sometimes it's a bona fide excess. Do we have a reserve that we put that into?
We will get to that on the next page, and a good chunk of it is bona fide excess, but some of it is, like you're saying, stuck in areas.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. If there's no other questions, I would move up to the next page, which is our net assets page. And this is where you can see actually all the different funds exist and how those different funds are restricted. And so this first the first three are our internally restricted funds. And so the first one is the one that is completely unrestricted and can be used for whatever purpose is required. The next fund is the Capital Asset Acquisition Fund, which is where a certain portion of the money that comes in each year is allocated to this fund and is later used to buy large capital things, trucks. It basically always each year it goes up until eventually it is spent on vehicles and it goes down. Then it builds up over time again. Then there's conservation initiatives, which is usually funded by unspecified donations. But this year in particular, there was a special project that was funded out of the conservation initiatives. I believe it was the tree frog program. And so that is why it actually has decreased this year, because some of that money was actually spent on a particular item. And down below is the externally restricted funds. And this is where the money that's received from someone who's outside of the board has decided to restrict these funds for a particular purpose. The first three funds were already in existence in existence and more or less continued operating as is with little changes. The last fund, the Skugal Gland Acquisition Fund, is a brand new fund this year, which was funded by a $150,000 donation that was specifically for the purpose of acquiring land in the Skugal area. I know there was a particular hope that was to be acquired with it, but it appears that wasn't going to work out. And so it's basically been kind of, that money does belong to you, but it is kind of sitting in a separate fund to be used later, only if you find an appropriate property to purchase. Likewise, that's the same with the Ken Reed Conservation, although it was to be actually used on different equipment and improvements for the conservation area. And the Durham East Cross Forest was for land in that area. And so you can see, oh, sorry, and down at the bottom, there's also the Capital Reserve Fund. And this is just kind of the separate fund that has all your land, your buildings, your equipment. And this is kind of things you own, but is basically not free money that is available to spend on anything, because it's all kind of trapped in these assets that belong to you and you can't kind of use them in that manner. So as you can see, the overall net assets at the end of the year was $4,349,387, of which kind of the unrestricted assets that were available for any purpose was $527,972, while the rest were all kind of restricted for those certain matters. Does anyone have any questions regarding the net assets? If there isn't any questions, I would move to page 1, the statement of financial position. And so this page here, you can see the number one thing that jumps out to me is the significant increase in cash, basically almost $1 million. And that's partly due to the actual surplus for the year. That having a surplus means you brought in more money than you spent. That increases your cash position. Likewise, though, you can also see that deferred revenue, $915,355, is basically $500,000 more than last year's number of $422,000. And that's where another kind of $500,000 of excess cash comes from. And that also kind of relates to those projects that you received money for them, but weren't actually able to do the project yet. Some of that is specifically special benefiting money that's provided from the municipalities, but some of that as well includes grants and other money given by other granting bodies for specific items or specific projects that you were to perform that you were not able to this year. Normally that number stays a bit steadier, that it is kind of around 400,000 every year as you get a bit more money to do new projects. You complete those projects and recognize the revenue, and you get new projects for the next year. So this year is a bit unusual in that it is kind of a very significant increase there. And that is partly why the cash has increased so much. And so that kind of, a portion of that cash is kind of tied up in that 915 of, it needs to be spent on these projects going forward, or you'll have to return it to the granting body. You'll also notice there was a slight increase in accounts receivable and accounts payable. To me, this was a year where that is pretty common with most entities that we have seen, just because there's a bit more hassle in terms of preparing payments and having other companies prepare their payments to issue to you. Just if you'll remember, December was when we kind of re-entered the last one of the other lockdowns. And so kind of all those stuff kind of contributed to just receivables being collected a bit slower and payables being paid a bit slower than they have been in the past. And some of the payables too are just even the invoice isn't received quite as promptly as it used to be from a supplier. And so that's kind of nothing unusual there. It does just kind of seem a little weird that both have increased. Hopefully that is kind of a 1 year issue. That next year will hopefully be more normal than this year was. Is there any questions about the statement of financial position? If there isn't any questions, normally this is all we cover in general in this meeting, but if you have any kind of specific questions about the statements overall, or there was any details in a note you had a question about, please feel free to ask now, and I will do my best to answer your questions.
Thanks, Tyson. Can I get you to pull that screen sharing down, and then we can see if there's any general questions?
Hopefully someone can. Thank you,
go.
Jonathan.
Okay. That's perfect. Someone did. Ask and you shall receive. Is there any general questions for Tyson on the financial statements? Seeing
Yes,
none, can I get
yes,
a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, I have to unmute my microphone. So it looks like the on the last page, page 1, the tangible capital assets are slightly reduced, even though there's additional revenues provided for purchase in Skugal. Is it just because those monies aren't regarded as capital until they're tied into an actual land?
Exactly.
component?
Basically, once you buy the piece of land, if you bought the land for 150,000, the tangible capital assets there will increase by 150,000, and that fund will decrease by 150,000. So essentially, once you spend it, that fund will disappear, and it'll then be kind of, like I said before, kind of trapped in that capital asset. So that does tend to decrease a little bit every year, just as we depreciate some of the depreciable assets that are in those classes.
Yeah.
And otherwise, there was some additions this year of a part of the website. Sorry, the website kind of fell over both years, 2019 and 2020. So there was some additions this year into it, but not any of large size.
No significant. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for Tyson regarding the statements? Okay, can I get a motion, please, that the presentation on the audited financial statements for 2020 be received? Moved by Catherine Moore, Director Moore, second by Director Hooper. Anyone opposed to that motion? Thank you. We'll consider that passed. So then we go to our next report. Tyson, just stick around for a minute if you would. We've got a resolution here, item 7.1, and I had a question. So resolved that the 2020 draft financial statements as audited by the firm Peter Shennett Professional Corporation be approved. And it says, and then the reserves be allocated as presented in the financial statement. And I'm wondering if we could change that, what the board thinks about just recognizing what we're putting that money into which reserve. So if somebody looks at the minutes, we don't just sort of say as per the presentation. Can we actually have it in that motion where that extra excess revenue is being into what reserves? Can we? And I don't know who I should direct that to. How would we reword that? Do we $33,066 into the capital reserve and $230,132 into the general reserve? Is that would that basically capture what we're trying to be transparent? Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can jump in there for a second, we do have a prepared resolution that states. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think I'm unmuted now. Maybe I accidentally pressed my space bar. I seem to be technologically challenged today. So we do have a resolution prepared that speaks exactly to that, and maybe we can bring that up and help facilitate that resolution. And so this resolution identifies the summary that's in the audited financial statement in words, and identifies the amounts and the allocations or changes that are resulting from the financial statement.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. If the board is open to that, I think just from transparency in the minutes, it's good to show where that excess revenue has gone and where we've made adjustments in our reserves. So, okay. If everybody's
My only thought is whether it should be divided into kind of the difference kind of between the internally restricted assets and the externally restricted, where in some ways, I guess while you're kind of approving the 150 to land acquisitions, you don't necessarily have the authority to change that either, where you could change the conservation initiatives and capital assets. The other groupings aren't quite as at your discretion as those three are.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn that over to Jonathan or somebody who knows what the heck you're talking about, Tyson. Do we need to make an adjustment in that and reword that somehow, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we could proceed with the resolution as it states while Tyson is addressing that the board itself does not have much option in how we allocate, for example, Windy Ridge Conservation Area, Skugal Gland Acquisition, and the Durham Region funds. Well, primarily there's the first three reserves in the statement of changes in net assets can be allocated as needed, but we could move forward with this resolution on the understanding that we aren't able to change the last three mentioned.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I could. The first part does mention unrestricted. I wonder if we should just add the word restricted in front of the ones that aren't. So it does say, and the reserves be adjusted in the amount of 230,000 to unrestricted net assets, but maybe we should add restricted in front of each of the ones that are specifically, ones that we don't have a jurisdiction over. And I think, would that perhaps resolve your concerns, Mr. Shennett?
And I guess I'm okay with it overall. I guess I just wanted to make sure that there was that kind of distinction between the differences of some you are kind of receiving and approving, and some you are actually approving and could change if you wanted.
And to your point, Mr. Chair, of being, forthright, I wonder if just adding restricted to those ones might be appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to Jonathan. I think we can probably go either way, but Jonathan, what's your thought on that? Should we identify what's restricted, or are we really just putting this out for information on the allocation of funds, which whether we have a say in where they go or not, is that really crucial?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we can add in brackets, just restricted after those three, and I think that would kind of settle having it addressed in the minutes there for future reference, and then it would also balance back to how we kind of present the statements. So I see that as a value. It would be valuable at this time.
Okay.
I don't see any harm. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. If you can pull the screen down so I can see everybody again, I appreciate it. Thank you. So everybody's sort of clear on where we're going. We're just looking for some transparency. I need a mover and a seconder for those motions with the restricted. Councillor Dunn or Director Dunn and Kiesebrink. Moved by Director Dunn, second by Director Kiesebrink. Any questions, further questions on the statements? Anyone opposed to that motion? We'll consider that motion passed. Thank you, Mr. Shennett. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Deborah, for your clarification. And thanks, Jonathan. I know that a lot of work, you did a lot of work on those financial statements, so I wanted to recognize that. Thank you. So we're going to go, just before we go to our next presentation, I just need some clarification. Mark, can you just, and it's regarding Robert. Robert, I know you're voting and you're putting up your hand, but I was told you weren't appointed by Durham Council yet. And I'm not sure you're a voting member until you are. So I'm just going to ask the chair. I don't want you to keep wondering why I'm not referring to you, Robert.
No,
I'm just looking for some clarification if you're actually been appointed by the council, and we're not a problem. I just don't want you to think I'm ignoring you, Robert, when I keep seeing your hand go up. So I thought I'd get some clarification. Thank you. Okay, so let's go down to 7.1, which is the corporate strategic plan. I will turn it over to Mark, is going to make the introductions there.
Great. And Mr. Chair, before I start in on the strategic plan, I just wanted to note that we did have someone else that's joining us on the call this afternoon. It's a new staff person that we have that's recently come to our organization. Her name's Taylor Frederick, and she is our new forestry technician. Hopefully you don't mind, Mr. Chair, that I'm doing this, but there's the lady right there. She's a Fleming grad, which is always great that we have some local talent, locally educated in our office. She also has a Bachelor of Science in Forestry from Lakehead University, and they tend to have a lot of trees up there. So she's a welcome addition to our team. She's developing the $50 million tree program, Durham Regional Tree Planting Program, and our annual tree seedling sales, amongst other things. So we're very happy to have her. I know Christy's enthralled, as are the rest of the team, that she's here, a great team member, and look forward to some great things from her. She has had some relevant experience as well related to the activities that we're doing. So she worked for consulting companies for several years, performing private and public land forestry management services, including tree planting and private land management, inventory measurements, and those sorts of things, including carbon sequestration as a component of those. So we're very lucky to have Taylor, and just want to recognize her with the board.
Awesome. Glad you did, Mark. Thanks. And Taylor, welcome to the team. I know we all speak for everybody. We all look forward to working with you. And I do apologize for skipping over your introduction. I have it right here in my notes and all these new faces in front of me. And Mark, yeah, I see that I completely missed it. So I apologize for that, but welcome aboard. And it's great to see you.
Thanks for the introduction, everyone. I'm very excited
Okay.
to be here and happy to meet you all.
Thank you.
Great. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll start in on the strategic plan, and we have a couple of guests with us as well on this topic. Brenda Stonehouse, she is the strategy and innovation specialist at the City of Kawartha Lakes. She's our ringer, I think they're called, for this kind of thing. So many thanks to the City of Kawartha Lakes for allowing us to benefit from her expertise and her knowledge base. And John Chambers, our marketing communication specialist, who has been heading up our strategic plan. We're happy to present the draft strategic plan for discussion, and we position this currently as a 5-year strategic plan. It could be a longer term strategic plan. I think it would fit within that, but currently we've placed it as a 5-year plan. It certainly allows for some good strategic direction over the next number of years, of course, that we can follow. And there's, I would consider, some notable improvements over our previous strategic plans, in that the language is a little bit more simplistic, a little bit more clear, provides a greater strategic action that can be followed up by more specific actions in each of the years. And the other thing is, and I would consider this to be one of the biggest pieces within all of that, is our vision and mission have changed, which makes it a lot more clear and something that you can get behind a lot easier. So those are some highlights. We've certainly done a lot of consultation in the community and with you as a board and our team. And it's just a great foundation, I think. So we're very excited to present this to you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brenda Stonehouse to talk a little bit about the process, and then John will follow with some additional details.
Thank you. John, do you have the presentation? Thank you. So it's nice to see everyone again. Just to remind you of the process that we took for the strategic plan, we had 2 sessions with you that I facilitated. And the first one, we did that environmental scan, where we were looking at our pest analysis. So we looked at the political, economic, social, and technological issues and trends that might be affecting your organization or could affect it in the future. And then we did the SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for your organization. Then in the second session, we asked you to come up with all of those things that you wanted to accomplish in the next 5 years. And so we took all of that information and we looked at the action items that you came up with a list and sent them out again to you as a survey to help prioritize. So there were a number of surveys that were done. The same survey went to the board of directors, went to the leadership team, and went to all staff. And then we took all of that feedback, refined the actions just a little bit, and then sent them out to the community to get their input. So after all of this input and feedback, we took all of that, sifted through it, filtered it out, and came up with your draft strategic plan. John?
Thanks, Brenda. Thank you very much to the board as well. Certainly this has been an in-depth sort of process of engagement and getting everybody's responses and feedback. So I certainly appreciate everybody's time and energy and enthusiasm in doing that. Brenda has a remarkable ability to turn the sometimes complex into a much more simple approach. And one of the things we had noticed with our current strategic plan is there's a lot of silos built within it. It was almost built from a department type of perspective. And what we really wanted to do is come up with a plan that recognized the value and the role of each member, each employee, each organization, community group, how all of that, those perspectives and those skill sets and ideas all filter back and work together sort of cohesively. So what we did go out as part of the community engagement. Obviously with COVID, we're not able to go out and do sort of the in-person engagement that we normally would have liked to have done. We did go out to some of our media partners, Kawarthas Lakes this week, Peterborough this week, local radio stations. We did a comprehensive social media campaign. We went direct to a number of our partners, the Skugal Lake stewards, our member municipalities, who were great in working with us and sharing that information to come up with a plan that really addressed three key issues. Make it simple, make the language accessible and relatable to people across the sort of the spectrum of from scientific and technical to, just somebody who comes out and goes for a walk in a conservation area. And then to remove the silos. So when that was all said and done, we present to you the 2022 to 2026 draft strategic plan. I'm just going to hit some highlights here, as Mark had alluded to. The first thing you'll notice as sort of a major change is the vision. This is quite a bit different. It's quite a big departure from where we were at. There were some challenges, perhaps with some things that, it was an interpretation sort of thing where could we actually achieve that vision? And Brenda was really instrumental in sort of that drilling down of in 5 years from now, 6 years, 10 years from now, if you accomplished everything within the plan, would you achieve your vision? And that's sort of where we came from. And this vision, I think, really resonated and spoke to the core of what it is we're trying to do, which is engage communities that love, respect, and appreciate our natural environment. So it doesn't matter if you're coming from a conservation lands perspective, from an education perspective, if you're coming from an integrated watershed management, sort of a scientific or technical. Ultimately, if we accomplish all of the things within the plan, we will end up with engaged communities, first and foremost, that have perhaps a much greater or improved appreciation and respect and love for their natural environment and certainly the lakes, the rivers, and so forth. The second piece was the mission. And of course, we want to obviously continue to champion watershed health as the recognized leader in environmental sustainability. So it's just short, simple, and direct to the point. We have gone from our former strategic priority areas and enablers, and we have simplified that down to three core strategic priority areas, being protect and restore, engage and inspire, and innovate and enhance. So some of the key changes you will notice: the simplified and focused division. First Nations plays a much more integral component of this strategic plan, recognizing our valuable partners, recognizing the sort of the knowledge and the information that they bring to the table. And now having a member on our board, it makes it that much more important to include that engagement piece and to have that recognition within there. So within our new draft strategic plan, you will notice on page 2, there is a space in there for a land acknowledgement that we wanted to make sure was up sort of front and center within that plan. As well, on the back page for the map, rather than refer to it as a watershed map now, we found a lot of people struggled with sort of outside the building, sort of people struggled with the concept of a watershed in terms of trying to determine, the geographic means of that watershed, because it does encompass the different areas of municipalities and that thing. So we're referring to it now as a community map. It's the Kawarthas Conservation community map. And we have also recognized on that map the Mississauga, the Skugal Island First Nations there as well. We have removed the silos, as I mentioned, that existed previously. And this plan, I think, does a much greater job of recognizing the employee and the departments and how everybody is going to contribute to the plan. And we have made the plan about the people. So focus on the staff, focus on our partners, and focus on the community. And that is the sort of the overview of that. And you have the plan in front of you. So at this point, I will turn it back to Mark.
Thanks, John. So that's a great kind of synopsis of our strategic plan as it's drafted currently. So I will turn it over to the chair for everyone to discuss.
Great, thank you. We'll just have a discussion on the plan that's in front of you. I really like it. I think it hits all the things that we talked about at the very beginning, and I certainly appreciate the work Brenda and John you've put into this to sort of take that spectrum of ideas and pull it into a simple, easy, readable plan, which kind of gets your attention. So I think it's great. Comments, and by all means, Jeff, if you've got some input, or Jonathan or Robert, go ahead if something new in front of you. But anybody want to comment on the plan or thoughts or questions? Director Kiesenbrink, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, John and Brenda and everyone who helped to facilitate a very important exercise for the Kawarthas Conservation Authority. I noticed that some of the advertising that you did, even in the St. Catharines Standard, they picked up that you were looking for public input, which I think is amazing. They said, if you live, work, or play in Kawarthas watershed, actually that was you, Mayor Lethem, we want to hear from you. I did want to ask John, with the Survey Monkey that you had for that and other social media and other advertising posts, what was the kind of feedback that you got back from some of just the local residents, and what were some of the highlights of that feedback that you could comment on for us?
I think the survey itself was extremely educational from a number of standpoints. Some of the feedback, some of it wasn't surprising at all. Some of it was very surprising. One of the key pieces, which will help inform sort of our communications moving forward, is there still seems to be a lot of confusion about the role of different organizations and agencies. So one of the pieces of feedback that we received quite a bit is we need to do a better job of managing lake levels, which obviously that's a Trent Severn responsibility.
Oh,
It's not a
interesting.
conservation authority. So there was some confusion there. There was a big focus on mental health and programming that supports mental health, trail networks and connectivity, being able to facilitate sort of getting outdoors and recreational. And then a lot of it was the science and the data. People want the information. So, continue to do what you do, but provide that information in an open and accessible way that means something to people. So, they can look and say, what is the quality or what is the state of my lake? We do a watershed report card, but it's sort of on a more local level. How are things happening, or how are things right here in our own community, and where can we get to, sort of go to get that information in, not necessarily a real time format, but certainly a more current, up to date and more frequently updated manner.
So further through you, Mr. Chair, just that's really interesting. With respect to the lake level management, is it worth us being a relayer of that information if they're kind of looking to Kawartha Lakes as being the disseminator of information, even if it's a misconception? Is it worth us partnering in some way and relaying that information somehow?
I think for me, it really provides a good direction to really look at our communication, how we're communicating with people, and even more so than that, where people are getting their information. We obviously have a vast network. We have cottage associations and environmental groups and community groups. So, I mean, anytime we have sort of a network that can help point people in the right direction or clarify information, that's certainly, I think, a benefit to all of us. But I think it really speaks to looking at where are people getting their information from, and what information are they looking at. It was certainly something we've started this year with the new website. We've spent a lot more time looking at where are people going on the website, what information are they looking for there. Are they getting the information they're looking for by how long are they spending on the website or on a particular page? What search terms are they using? So we're starting to put all of that information together and compile all of that information. And I think what you'll see coming out of, sort of the fourth quarter of this year and into the first quarter of next year is sort of a more concerted plan of not only sort of disseminating the important information of the work we do, but also offering sort of that educational perspective of who does what.
That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the plan? Director Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Latham. I really like what you've done. It's very succinct and quite easily understood. Just on the dissemination of information and that, you mentioned that you advertised or communicated this through, I believe you said Kawartha. I'm not sure what it was, Lindsay this week and that sort of stuff. Could you just refresh me on that, please?
Sure. We put together 3 media releases throughout the course of the community engagement. The community service survey was posted for just over 4 weeks. Those media releases were in turn picked up. We didn't do any paid media, strictly because there's too many to try and sort of reach, and for the budgetary sort of issues, the cost of, I'll say, print advertising, if we were to pay even $500 or $600 for an ad and then replicate that across 10 different print products, it can get quite expensive. So what we did was we put out the media releases, and then those media releases were picked up and printed within some of the Tour-Star products, including Kawartha Lakes this week, Lindsay Advocate, Kawartha 411, I believe, the local radio station, 91.9, picked that up as well. So we did it through those means. And then when we did our social media campaign through LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, we reached out to our municipal partners, Brock, Trent Lakes, and the like, and tagged those folks and notified those folks who were kind to then reshare that information. And that's really sort of where we went with that. Internally, our staff reached out to their community groups and the lake associations and volunteer groups that they work with to really try and put the survey in front of, I'll say, interested people. When we look at our social media numbers, it was around 29,000 people is what we had reached over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. And then, obviously we don't receive that many responses, but what we did was try and really reach out to the people who were engaged or potentially engaged, and connect with those people. And they in turn shared people like the Skugal Lake Stewards and groups like that.
All right, thanks, John. I guess what I was getting at is that I know that in Brock, and I probably should have brought this up earlier, like months ago, but you don't seem to see much in the Brock Citizen or the Brock Voice. The Brock Voice being an online publication, and Brock Citizen is a subsidiary of Metroland out of Lindsay, but very seldom seems to carry the same stuff. So I'm just only suggesting that maybe in the future we could include them as in our press releases, and also just on not necessarily to do with the strategic plan, but on general news releases. Being involved in agriculture, I subscribe to a newspaper called the Ontario Farmer, and I'll often see press releases from conservation authorities everywhere in Ontario on different topics, and I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea for Kawartha Conservation to include them in our press release list to just to help keep people informed. So that's a little bit off topic, but thank you.
And through you, Mr. Chair, what I can tell you is that all 3 of those groups receive our press releases. There's,
okay.
there's earned media and there is free media. And when we put out a press release, that's just what it is. We put out a press release. Some people pick it up and run with it. Some people don't. As a former editor for a number of years, I can tell you it usually comes down to deadline day, and we've got 9 column inches left on page 3 that I need to fill. So we sort of take something and put it in there. Otherwise, it just doesn't go in. But again, your point is very valid, and I think, and it's something we've talked about internally as well, in terms of how we reach different areas and different groups, and whether it's the strategic plan or outside the strategic plan. And again, I think you will be seeing again later this quarter or Q4 into 2022, you will be seeing a sort of a different approach in terms of how we reach out to people coming forward.
Thank you for that, and thanks for the information that those have already been included, and certainly I understand completely the cost of a paid ad or paid press release is not worth it at all. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments on the presentation, Director Hooper? You're just on mute, Ron. That's okay.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone, Ms. Stonehouse, Mr. Chambers, and all of staff for their involvement with this project. the thing that I liked most about it was the fact that we as board and a staff sat down together and worked through some issues in regards to it. And I thought that was very, very smart to do that. And I would just like my only comment in regards to when you do the community building, it's on my page 22 of the agenda, where it says expand partnerships. I thought we were sort of missing the boat a little bit on education. And I thought, well, then I finally read it and it says expanding partnerships with our school boards and I thought, well, why not change that to our different levels of educational outreach? Because we have Sir Sanford Fleming, we have Trent University, we have the school boards, as well as Indigenous community, to keep that sort of that flow of information going out there, because we do have, and we have one employee who's just come from Trent University, Sir Sanford. And the more you keep that information sort of flowing out there, I think that and whether you want to do it through the boards or add that as an addition, I don't know. I think it's very important that we keep that. And not unlike what Director Smith said, we got to keep that information flowing to the different associations too as well. So I just thank you for that, and thank you for the great work you did on it.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments on the presentation? Director Kiesebrink, go ahead.
Thank you. This is actually just a quick question. Doesn't probably need to be answered in this setting, but perhaps Councillor Forbes, maybe you could advise us the best strategy to reach out to all of our First Nations partners. There's these formats for media and press releases and what have you, but maybe you could help to inform us so we can make sure that all of our First Nations partners have opportunity to provide comments in future for things such as this that we've just worked on. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, hopefully this one's going to be nice and easy for Skugal at least, because hopefully I'll be pretty easy to get a hold of and know and regular attendance here at these meetings. So and I can reach out to Curve Lake First Nation and that as well. I'm not sure who the best one by name to reach out to over there, but I can definitely get you that information. So I was playing a little catch up here because I did just it got mixed in my emails. So I apologize for that. I have been reading as fast as I can here to be caught up, but I'm looking forward to what the future has for us for sure, and working closely with everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, let's get a motion that the presentation on the corporate strategic plan be received, and then we'll go over to the plan itself. So can I get Director Smith, seconded by Director Kiesebrink? Anyone opposed to receiving the presentation? Okay, we'll consider that passed. So in so it says the draft. So I had a couple of questions. So a couple of comments. One thing we need to obviously drop in when we have clarification, the First Nation land acknowledgement, the message from the CAO. I know I talked to Mark about this, or he brought it up. I think my opinion, see what the board thinks, is we should have the message from the CAO and the board. I mean, this is our strategic plan as well, not just Ron's or not just Mark's. And he mentioned that it's from staff, but it's also the board strategic plan. So are we okay if we say message from the CAO or from the board and the CAO, and then as where it says Mark at the bottom, CAO, put my name as the chair representing the board of directors, and then I think we're sort of covered off on our message. We can have the same message. We don't need different messages, but just my thoughts. I think it's important that people know this is not just from Mark. This is the board's strategic plan as well. So any objections to that? Any comments on that?
I think our last one had that, didn't it, Mr. Chair? I'm pretty sure that's how the last strategic plan read.
I think it did. Yeah.
I think that might just be an oversight.
I think it's important. So I know Mark said he asked me, and sorry, somebody say something. Okay, I know Mark asked me if I thought it was should be in there, and I said, well, you know what, I'll check with the board, but I think it's probably a good idea. So if there's no major changes, I mean, sorry?
Suggestion, Mr. Mayor, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the motion that we've got, the referendum resolution, is to receive the draft plan, be received and forwarded to board endorsement at a future meeting. And I guess I'm questioning if we need to send it to a future meeting, if we're good with the strategic plan as amended with those suggestions. And obviously, once we have the First Nations land acknowledgement gets put in there at the front, can we endorse it here today, or do we need to, and we can let Brenda get on to her other 10 strategic plans she's working on. Or do we need to send it back and come back with a final copy? I mean, I'm not hearing any major issues with the plan. And what's your thought, folks? Talking a bunch today. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that the motion, the draft corporate strategic plan be received, and updates to the plan as discussed be implemented and endorsed with the suggested amendments be endorsed by the board. If you're good with that, we'll get a mover and a seconder, and unless there's any major objections. Director Hooper, you'll move that. Thank you. Director Windover, you'll second that. Thank you. Any comments, questions regarding that motion? Final comments on the plan?
Mr. Chair, will the First
Director Kiesenberg,
Nations...
is my signal breaking up?
Will the First Nations acknowledgement, will that be circulated to the board prior to being put into the documentation?
I think we can do that. Mark, is that you okay with that? I think that was understood.
Yes, absolutely. The intent is to make sure the First Nations land acknowledgement is passed through the board, that the board endorse it first, and then we'll insert it into the strategic plan. And I hope to work with Jeff on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have a look at it for sure, and work closely with you. And has it been sent out? Forgive me here. Has it been sent out to the First Nations yet, or is it just something that's going to be passed through now after you guys have the board's approved it all?
Yeah, so it has not been passed, Jeff, for your information to the board. So it's I'll be working with you if you're in agreement with that, and we can go from there.
Fantastic. Yeah, just playing catch up here. So yeah, if I'm yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Mark.
You're good. You haven't missed it. Don't worry. Any other Director Hooper? Do you want to speak to it? You made the motion. Are you just you're good with that, or do you want to talk to it? You're good.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any final comments, questions on the motion or the plan? Anyone opposed to that motion? Okay, we'll consider it passed. Thank you. Thank you all, John and Brenda and everyone else who worked on it. And thanks for the board for taking the time to follow up on those surveys and such. So well done. Okay, so let's move down to item 8.1, staff reports. Just going to ask for a quick overview on 8.1. I know integrated watershed management monitoring strategy. Emma or Nancy, if you can give us a quick overview on that report, and we'll see what we can do. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, this report really is just an update on where we are with our monitoring strategy. So back in November, the board endorsed progression of development of monitoring strategy in its entirety. So we updated you on progress back in April 21. So this report really just provides an update from that period until now. So what I will say is we're on track. We're making really great progress on this. There is a 46-page comprehensive review document that has been made available to the board to have a look through. So this really just highlights all the kind of SWOT analysis we've been doing, the kind of review of our the cost it takes us to do our programs, and just really looking at the benefit and the value that our programs bring as well. So the intention, we're working on the draft strategy currently, and we intend to bring that back to the Board of Directors in October for your endorsement of the report at that point, for us then to go into a public consultation period. So that's a highlight of the report. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Emma. And we just need a motion that the update on monitoring strategy be received, and we'll see if there's any questions for you. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Dunn or Director Dunn, seconded by Director Hooper. Any questions for Emma on the monitoring, watershed monitoring, management monitoring strategy?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead.
It's pretty simple. Maybe I missed something. Who is involved in, who is the strategic guidance group? I just want to ask that question. Who's that made up of? The very last page. Next steps.
Yes, so if I may jump in there. So through the chair, yeah, we have members of the community on that group. We also have members from academia and federal government that also help us with that. So they've been instrumental on steering how we do this, what we look at, and then kind of how we pull the report together at the end. So they've been really, really great and really helpful in providing guidance and advice to us on how we go forward with this. They're all experts in their relevant fields, and yeah, we're lucky to have them all. Thank you.
Excellent. That's good to know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Emma on the report? Okay. Anyone opposed to receiving that report? We will consider that passed. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Item 8.2 is permits issued by designated staff. Ron, our planning guru, is going to give us a quick overview, hitting some pretty good timelines there again, Ron. So you're up. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I like the guru endorsement there. Yeah, it was this is sort of a 3-month since reporting back to the board, so it's a fairly long one today. And I noted that being 3 months, it sort of represents about a quarter of 2021. And with 138 permits, we probably processed about a third of what we did in all of 2020, just in that quarter of a year. So obviously very happy with the permits getting out generally on time and being determined if they're a complete application all the time. And we strive for nothing short of 100% all the time. So you know, when there's something other than 100, it gives us something to work towards. And I think maybe summer schedules might have been the only thing that prevented us from being there this time as well. So happy to provide that information to the board.
Thanks, Ron. I'll just going to get a motion that the following section 28 permits issued by staff be received, and that the permitting performance report be received. And then we'll get a mover and a seconder. We'll see if there's any questions. Ron, moved by Director Smith, second by Director Moore. Thank you. Are there any questions for Ron on this permitting report? Director Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Letham, through you to Mr. Warren. A permit that I expected to see on here and isn't regards the fill permit for in Brock Township for Cars Auto. Could you update us on the status of that, please?
Certainly, through the chair. I can report that while it wasn't on this report, you will find it in the September one, because it was issued the week before last, as a matter of fact. And one of the key things we were waiting on was an agreement on the haul route from both the region and whatnot. So everybody seems to be in line. All the ducks are in order, and the permit has been revised, updated, and issued.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this report for Ron? Seeing none, we have a motion to receive. Anyone opposed to receiving this report? We'll consider that passed. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
8.3 is strategic actions update, second quarter. I'll turn it over to Mark. Go ahead.
There you go. Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. This report identifies all the actions that have happened as they relate back to our strategic plan on all of our program areas and projects that we're doing. So you'll see it really covers off the full suite of program areas and projects: flooding, low water. You'll see a reference to stormwater management guidelines, source water protection. We started the Lake Dalrymple lake management plan. There's a lot of stewardship and conservation area activity. A lot of communications work that we've been doing over the first quarter. You also see some of the innovation and kind of rethinking of our services and how we deliver it in the second quarter updates. And you also see that our foundation was active in an Explore Nature Challenge series. So that got way in the second quarter and is currently underway now. If there's any specific questions, myself or one of the directors would be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Mark. I'll just ask for a motion that the staff report on strategic actions update for the second quarter be received, and then we'll see if there's any questions. Can I get a mover for that, please? Director Seymour Fagan, thank you. Seconded by Director Kiesebrink. Any questions for Mark or staff on the second quarter updates? Anyone opposed to receiving that report? We'll consider it passed. Thank you. Okay, we'll go down to the 8.4 is the CAO report. Mark, you're still with us. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I'll highlight on a couple of items. You have the report, of course, in front of you. I'll touch on something that we've been kind of waiting on for a little while, which is the release of the provincial regulations. It's still on the books, so to speak, but the draft regulations have not been released at this point in time. So I understand that there's a lot of work going on to make sure that it works. And of course, there is a cabinet shuffle that occurred recently as well that may have impacted on the timeframes for that release. My understanding from the discussions is that the timeframes will be held. So by the end of the year, we will still have to develop kind of the list of services and a transition plan, but it is getting late in the year, so we'll see. Nothing's kind of firm until they release the information, and I do believe there was a consultation session, a public consultation session that was going to be coincident with the regs. So it continues to be a bit of a wait and see, but we have moved forward as a conservation authority group to look at transition plans and implementing what we know at this time. There's a lot of discussion as well in the CAs on MZOs and some of the pressure that's put on conservation authorities to issue the permits and kind of that scope of reference. So one of the key things that we see is that the MZO very clearly says that the permit must be issued. The only thing that can be debated at the board level is the actual conditions of the permit. So it's a little different than traditional hearings that we would go through. So that's something that that we're looking at, and we'll have to incorporate in our procedures. There's also a compensation component that I know a couple of CAs were working with, and that's not something that we currently have, but was considered to be important in that frame of reference, because the Conservation Authority's regulations do speak to compensation. So that is identified as a gap currently in our policies. Some great news is that there was, through Conservation Ontario, a working group struck to look at CA governance and making sure that there's a standard that's hit by all conservation authorities. And this included, I believe, about 8 different items related to governance. That included things like making sure all of you are identified on our website. That there's the administrative bylaws are posted, that we have meeting schedules, agendas, and minutes posted for everyone's benefit, the audited financial statements and fee schedules. So we are compliant with all of that. We did make one tiny tweak. We were actually compliant before all of this came through. The governance committee was struck. The only change we made was just clarification on our website that our board of directors is appointed as per the Act. So there are some authorities that have slightly different arrangements or might have orders in council that identify a slightly different arrangement for their board of directors. We don't have that, so we just made that one little tweak and we conform. So that's great. I already mentioned the Kawartha Conservation Foundation. In terms of pandemic response, it continues to be an evolving kind of process that we're all adapting to. So we are developing currently a vaccination policy and visitor vaccination policy. So that's kind of key to keeping everyone healthy and safe, not only within our team environment, but the greater population. So it's a good thing to do and only makes sense, I think, as well. We do remain closed to our community at this point in time, but we do have appointments that are possible. Just so you can't walk in the door without an appointment. Once the exiting the current COVID plan with the Conservative government, as we exit the pandemic, the roadmap to recovery, I believe it is, or exiting the pandemic. There's a fancy name behind it, but this exiting is a key piece. Then we'll open it up to the public at that point in time. So that's our plan there. Lots of other work that we're doing in terms of corporate services. Those are highlighted specifically. But I'll touch on our watershed engineer, and we had someone in stewardship, our landowner engagement and community support person. There's some vacancies in those positions. They've moved on to different organizations. So we will be filling those positions, and we have those out currently for looking at suitable candidates. There's a lot of other work that we've been doing, certainly in stewardship. There's a lot of focused work on the different projects that we have underway, certainly in terms of the different community grant systems that we have, Bring Back the Fish and our big OMAFRA grant. A lot of work going in there. So you'll see in one of the pictures a wetland going in. Some pretty exciting work that we're doing across the area. And you met Taylor earlier. She's busy doing the $50 million tree program, and we've had a lot of success with that as well this year. Mentioned a little bit of the Talking Forest. We're looking at continuing that innovation, and through that Explore Nature Challenge, I decided to sign up for it, and took my daughter out on the trails, and she absolutely ate up the Talking Forest. So that was, none of my prodding. I was kind of curious how she would react to it, but she loved it and was just itching to see the next tree and what it had to say. And of course, you don't know really when the next tree is unless you look at the map. I didn't show her that. So when we came across one, she was just, her eyes lighted up, and so it was fantastic to see. I can only imagine everyone else is experiencing the same thing. So kudos to Christy and her team. I know a lot of the team were involved in that, and everyone that contributed to the voices. It's a really good app, and really great for the community, and you learn some stuff too. So that's tremendous. So you see that the app version for Apple is currently under review and out for testing currently. So, and something else that's exciting with that is Christy and her team met with Indigenous knowledge keepers to expand, and I think there's some great opportunities on that end to incorporate that within the Talking Forest, and great not only for visitors to the CAs, but I think more importantly, even for First Nations community and learning language. So being a kind of first or second, depending on you count on it. I've lost my language, which is Polish background. So I know similar things are happening as well in other cultures. And certainly a great opportunity as well for learning language as a whole. A lot of work, as I mentioned, on conservation lands, so I'll move over that. But we did start the lake management plan, Lake Dalrymple management plan, and you heard the update on the environmental monitoring strategy. A lot of work going on in that area. And one aspect that's taken a lot of interest from the community is, of course, our aquatic plant control project, where we've installed 3 bubblers. And we're evaluating the effects of the bubblers and the impact on the ecology of the local area. It is a point that is important from a permitting perspective. Currently, the Parks Canada or Trans-Southern Waterway is reluctant to issue permits because they don't know what the impacts are. And so this is meant to address that hurdle and hopefully be able to have some good news for our community. So that's undergoing right now, and once we have some results, be interested in sharing those with the board as well. That's a bit of a summary on my CAO update, Mr. Chair, and certainly be willing to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Mark. Good stuff. I just wonder if under the Explore Nature Challenge, if you wanted to mention, I know you had told me before that our auditors supported that through our foundation. So do you want to give them a shout out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see Tyson is still on the phone there too. So I just wanted to mention that, yeah, our auditors supported our foundation, and they're a top level sponsor in the Explore Nature Challenge. So certainly appreciate their contribution to our foundation.
Much appreciated. Thank you. He must have saw that. Yeah, he saw the big reserve and wanted to set the example. So good stuff. Can I get a motion that the CAO monthly report for meeting June 21 or number 621 be received, please? And then we'll see if there's any questions. Director Kiesebrink, moved by Director Kiesebrink, second by Director Windover. Any questions for Mark on his CAO's report? Director Kiesebrink, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you for an excellent report, and congratulations on all the successes. I think it's really great that you were able to host those forest therapy walks in July, and that with the donations that were provided, that could be forwarded to the Canadian Mental Health Association, and that fits really nicely in with our strategic plan where we want to incorporate mental health. I think that was amazing. And then also, thank you for all the pictures. I love how in Ken Reed putting in those plexiglass covers and having those story walk, those permanent signs be adjustable for snow, so that the whole experience can be experienced year round. That's very creative. There's so much good stuff in this report. We couldn't comment on all of it, but just a super job to everybody. Congratulations.
Agree. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments for Mark? Anyone opposed to receiving the update? We'll consider that passed. Thank you. Our next one is 8.5, which is correspondence. I'll just get a motion that the attached correspondence be received, and then we'll see if Mark wants to highlight anything. Can I get a mover? Director Dunn, thank you. Second by Director Hooper. Mark, is there anything in the correspondence you want to point out to us, or just see if there's any questions? Go ahead.
Yep, sure. And I'll just comment a little bit on Deb's comment as well. I'm in the lucky position of having a great team behind me. So what you see in the CAO report is simply a statement of all the great work that we're doing across the organization. So just wanted to point that out. And it's great when people are thinking, and even better when they're thinking outside the box. And we certainly have that, and it's greatly appreciated, because I think it just helps build communities and support for the good things that we do. So on the correspondence, there's a couple of pieces that maybe I'll point out. One is the correspondence by Grant Bivol from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. We've included it as part of the correspondence to be received, but just wanted to point out that if the board did want to support that resolution, then that's something that the board could do. What they were asking in that correspondence was that we support the provision of native pollinator habitat with specialized native plant species through future development and redevelopment projects. So if the board was interested in that, we certainly could do that. And that's on the second page on the correspondence report. The other item that I'll mention is some correspondence that we received from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. That's kind of our home ministry. They did provide some guidance on submitting requests for minister exemptions, and this is specific to the appointment of chair and vice chair, for instance. And for our particular authority, I think the guidance is somewhat confusing, since they're suggesting that we would hold a pre-election before an election to gain an exception. So that's a little bit confusing, certainly, but I think what they're trying to do is address some of the other comments or requests from other CAs that have longer standing agreements that, for instance, appoint a chair for a period greater than the 2 years that are identified. Some identify for 5 or 10 years, for instance. So that's something that is a little bit different than what we're accustomed to, but certainly provides a little bit of confusion in terms of how we do it and how we might be able to apply before we actually have an election process. The other correspondence that I'll just note is the correspondence from Chief Kelly LaRocca from Mississaugas of Skugal Island First Nation, and many thanks to Jeff Forbes for attending. It was an appointment to appoint Jeff Forbes to our board. And that's everything, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. So we have a motion to receive. Any questions for Mark on the correspondence? Okay, we have a motion to receive. Anyone opposed to receiving the correspondence? We'll consider that passed. Mark brought up there is a request for a support resolution. I'm not sure what the request is, Mark. I can't seem to find it. I see it on your second page there. How would we word the support resolution if the board wanted to go there?
I think what we could do, Mr. Chair, is say that we support the resolution passed by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority related to provision of native pollinator habitat and specialized native plant species through future development and redevelopment projects, and just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. You've heard it. What is the board's wish? Director Kiesebrink, you'll move that? Thank you. Director Windover, you'll second that? Any questions, comments? Anyone opposed to that motion? We'll consider that follow-up motion passed. Thanks for pointing that out, Mark. Okay. Let's move on to item 9.1 is our action items, the 2022 proposed budget. We'll turn it over to Mark, but I got a funny feeling Wanda's going to want to jump in too, so go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll provide the shortest update I can so that Wanda can elaborate on it. The budget that we are proposing forward for your consideration is as a guideline to move forward into producing the budget at our next meeting. A draft budget is a 2.5% municipal levy increase, and then separately identify a number of pressure points that we have on the organization to provide some further consideration for integration into the budget. There's some detail in the staff report regarding some of the intricacies that we're dealing with COVID related to some of our special projects, and then we also identify a timetable for the budget that would result in, hopefully, if the board agrees, for a support for circulation November, and ultimately looking at a January approval if the timelines fit. So with that, I can pass it on to Wanda for additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this opportunity. We're just in the preliminary stages of our budget, and so the departments have submitted to me their first drafts of the budget. And we are trying to focus this 2022 budget on the strategic plan that we already have passed today. So with that in mind, we are developing the programs. We're looking at our mandate, the municipal objectives and how we fit into those. And we always focus on efficiencies when we can, and technology has been one of those efficiencies for us. And we're also looking at human resource capacities. When it comes to the special projects, they were deferred in 2020 during the pandemic, and we did manage to get a lot of deliverables caught up on that, but we also had our 21 deliverables that needed to be met. So there is a bit of a spillover into 22, and those deliverables will be accomplished most likely in 22 using the deferred revenue from the projects that's left over at the end of 21. So as well, inflation is one of those topics of the day with those high inflation rates, and they're being higher than the previous year, which was a low year. So most predictors are saying that this is a temporary situation, and it will remain high. The inflation will remain high, say the first half of 2021, and then mellowing out, easing off in the middle of 22. So based on that, what our approach has been is to propose the 2.5% levy increase, which is $40,325, so that it meets our business needs, provides some adjustments to salaries for inflation, for cost of goods, and will balance the highs and lows throughout the year. So when we're building our 22 budget, we're using some assumptions, and those assumptions are a 2.5% levy increase. The inflation rates, while uncertain, will be in the 3.5% until the second half of 22. The operating programs are designed with the focus on mandated and strategic plan goals. As well, the special projects will be incorporated, their deliverables will be incorporated into the 22 deliverables and matched by those deferred revenues I mentioned. MECP transfer funds will be $25,000, which that has been for the last 2 years. And planning and permitting revenues will continue with the 21 activity, as well as employment programs and grants will be more accessible to us than they have been in the past. In 2021, we had a lot of difficulty getting grants. So as well, what we're looking at, either being able to incorporate into our budget or bringing forward as an add-on if you wanted it to be that way. The salary adjustments and cost of living for our staff, including merit raises, in comprehensive review of our salary package and the benefits that go along with that. We're going to be looking at a gap analysis in our IT infrastructure, the server, the backup maintenance that we do, the assessment of the technology that we have, along with the security that we should have for that, any upgrades to that infrastructure. And most recently, we've been discussing a lot about putting our data, our files on the cloud, and that's where it would be safe for us. And so we'd have to look at the security on that as well. So we're also looking at a review of our policies, our corporate policies, to determine which ones we have gaps on, which ones need to be updated immediately. And as well, something that we've looked at a couple of times now is the implementation of a corporate WARE program and cost sharing that with the staff. So those would be some of the items that we haven't fully addressed as yet. So what I did do is provide you with a monetary analysis of what 2.5 represents to your municipality as an operating levy. And I do have the 2022 apportionment this year ahead of time. So I compared the 21 apportionment share with the 22 so that you can see the increase or decrease to your municipality before we even start. And then I've extrapolated that out to what it would be in dollars and in percentage. For the city of Kawartha Lakes, there's a small decrease in the apportionment percentage. Increase to the levy would be $20,579 or 2.18. In the region of Durham, their assessment base has increased, and so their apportionment has increased as well, $17,888, and that would be 3.21%. Municipality of Trent Lakes is a slight increase. Your increase in the general levy would be $1,709 or 2.51. And Cavan Monaghan had a small decrease. Your increase in levy would be $149 at 2.67%. And so, like Mark mentioned, we did create a timetable for the budget, hoping that the budget could be circulated to the municipalities in December and approved in January. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Kieserbrink, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we need to receive the report first before questions, or has that already been done? Did I miss it?
No, we have more than just a receive on this one. We need to approve the moving forward at this. So we can do questions first before we get into that. It's not just receive. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Wanda, and to our CAO for your comments in this budget. A question would be that because we did have resources left from last year, it was a very strange pandemic year, and there were monies left over, monies that aren't restricted. Is it possible for us to use some of those funds in order to mitigate the impact on the other on these increases? Because as you know, municipalities across the board and as everyone, we've all been impacted in the pandemic. I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, who to direct that question to.
I think we can probably ask Wanda her thoughts on that. I think the board certainly always has the ability to apply reserves to the levy to bring it down. I'm not sure if you want to comment on that, Wanda, or if that's more of a Mark question. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I can concede to Mark and his wisdom. I think my experience has been well, we have operated on very skinny reserves, and we're running a $4 million budget on very little money. And so when things go wrong, we don't have that safety net. There's a lot of restricted reserves there. Unspecified, it's just the largest it's been for years. That said, you know, is it a good working capital base for us? And if we use those monies, what happens is it seems to compound the following year to sustain human resource capacity or to meet you know, salary or benefit increases. If you expand a program by using those reserves, you can't sustain it into the following year. We do have a number of programs right now that are reliant on grant programs or employment programs. And when we don't get those, we don't have a backup plan. So the reserves would be a backup plan at the permission of the board during a specific year. But that's been my experience, and I might be contradicting what Mark would want to do, but I'll take the chance.
No, I think we'll hear from Mark, but I think we appreciate your comments, Wanda. I think, you know, my opinion is these increases aren't too far out of line. We've had a pretty reasonable budgets here the last few years and held the line, and I think we're always there is going to be some unexpected expenses always coming forward, and I'm a fan of having reserves. We don't ever need too many reserves, but having something there to fall back on is never a bad idea. So I certainly don't think that what you're requesting in this budget is out of line, but that's just my opinion. Mark, did you want to? I got you, Director Dunn, but Mark, do you want to comment on the reserves first? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I generally concur with what Wanda's said, and likewise, I didn't want Pat's hand to get tired there either. But we have been operating with a very slim reserves, and it does compound over years. Certainly makes it harder year by year to either make up for it or handle some of the other pressures that are coming down the pipe. So there's always pressures. Certainly, one of the things that's always top of my mind is our staff, and 80% of our budget is staff. So in order to treat our staff well, you know, a lot of that is really looking at trying to be competitive in the workforce. also provide some merit increases. So there's a lot of room for that. Anyways, I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll just follow up with Director Kieserbrink first. Did you have any follow-up, or are you good with that answer?
Yes, thank you for those answers. My question was in no way to take anything away from merit raises and in no way was to indicate that the budget or the recommendations were in any way, out of line. They're very, very appropriate. It was just a question because we did have a kind of a strange year where there were extra resources, much more than normal, that went into an unrestricted reserve situation. So just wanted to ask that question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Director Dunn, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to just kind of echo your remarks, Mr. Chair. I look at it as it's kind of an opportunity to build up our reserves. I've always been worried about the level that the reserves stand at. It's a chance we can build our reserves. I'm sure once we get things back to normal, there is going to be an increase in pressure to provide the services that we haven't provided in the past because of COVID. So there's going to be a bit of catch up going on. I just think it's a chance we can finally get some money in the bank. So I'm all in favor of the increase, and if we have a little extra, socking it away.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Director Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Councillor Dunn. Councillor Dunn and I don't always agree on everything, but I do agree with him on that. And I think he's phrased it well. It gives us a chance to recognize some merit raises and have a bit of a cushion there because we've run on a very bare bones budget for several years now. So this is our chance, I think. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Director Hooper?
Make sure my mic's on this time. As we move forward in the granting process from different levels of government, have we had any sort of feedback from the other levels? Sort of, has anybody been testing the water, so to speak, to see what the kind of feeling is in regards to some of the services that will be offered or some of the grant money that will be out there? Like everybody, they'll be cutting back, I'm sure, at different levels. And I just wondered, has anybody got sort of from staff got any sort of feeling in regards to successes or not?
Maybe what I'll do, Mr. Chair, is start out and then pass it on to Wanda. So what we are seeing from the various platforms that our provincial and federal government have is that climate change is certainly one of those items that is something that both areas are looking at doing something on. So the Made in Ontario Environment Plan is one that there's actually some groups that are meeting currently in order to evaluate how is it going to be implemented. So that's something that's on our radar. And the federal government has already been active on the climate change front. And that was one of their big platform pieces. So we expect that there will be continued movement on that front as we go forward. In terms of some other aspects, I hope there will be some infrastructure type work, as something that was noted during the entire pandemic that we've been dealing with is that there are infrastructure needs, and those need to be supported and have some ability for businesses to be able to adapt. So I do hope some of those come through. That's more locally based and that we would be able to apply for. I think that seems to be the big kicker right now, is that we tend not to be eligible for certain grants. And to me, those are two of the big ones. The corporate services side is one that there seems to be less grants for. But certainly when we branch out into some of the other work that we do, there are some possibilities for achieving some grants on that front. So.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I agree with everyone else. It'd be nice to have some money in our reserves too as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions comments on the proposed budget coming forward? So the recommended resolution in front of you is that staff bring forward a draft budget considering a 2.5% municipal operating levy increase based on the current operating levels and economic climate, and identify separately a list for board review, any additional budget costs for consideration and direction at the meeting of October 2021. Does anybody want to move that recommended motion, and a seconder? Director Dunn will move that. Director Moore, you'll second that. Any final questions or comments for either Wanda or Mark? Anyone opposed to that motion? We'll consider that passed. Thank you. Thanks, Wanda. Okay, we'll move down to our last report is 9.2, which is proposed board meeting schedule for 2022, excuse me. Mark, is there anything pretty straightforward? You've all got it in front of you. Is there anything you want to point out to us or anything you want to mention?
The only thing is that I'm being entirely optimistic and saying it's going to be in the boardroom, but obviously we'll kind of see how things progress.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense. We'll just take it one step at a time, but I think that's a good optimistic looking forward schedule. So anybody have any issues with that schedule or comments? We can certainly adjust it and have flexibility as we go if we need to. I need a motion then that the Board of Directors 2022 meeting schedule as discussed be adopted. Moved by Director Hooper, seconded by Director Smith. Any comments, questions? Anyone opposed to that motion, that schedule? We'll consider that passed. Thank you. New business. I don't believe we have any new business. Reports and updates from board members. I don't have anything to update. Does any board member have anything they want to update the rest of us on? Okay. We have no closed session, and then I just need a motion to adjourn. Director Windover, second by Director Kiesebrink. Anyone opposed to adjourning? As if, right? We'll consider that passed. Thank you all for joining us today, staff, board, new members. We look forward to seeing you the next time around. And thank you, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, everybody.
I know.
Thanks, everyone.